King of Podcasts, proudly presents The Broadcasters Podcast, a weekly media commentary talking about traditional and digital media headlines and talking to the content creators out front and behind the scenes. Here is the King of Podcasts.
Thanks for joining me for episode 131 of the Broadcasters Podcast. I'm happy all of you found the show and are able to go ahead and listen tonight. Let's go through the list of the table of contents, if you will, for tonight's program. A little bit later on, I'm going to continue my interview with Rachel Ann Mullins, American model, actress, and producer. She's also the host of No Filter Friday on Public House Media, which, if you're listening on a Friday as the show drops, hopefully you'll go ahead and find a new episode of her program through Public House Media. So go ahead and look for it and check it out. Meantime, we'll go ahead and bring that interview up for you to conclude my two-part interview with Rachel, which was a great interview to have with her. We'll go ahead and have that a little bit later on in the program. So if you're looking for that, probably scroll about 20-30 minutes down and you'll find it towards the second part of the program. I understand, listen, but there are stories I must get into that I must go ahead and comment on that are very important. Tonight, more importantly, is how much influence China has in terms of the media. You might remember a few months ago, I spoke with Larry Namer, who was one of the original co-founders of E! Entertainment Television. And right now, he is working a lot in producing movies and television in China and also trying to get certain projects from China produced to be distributed in the U.S. So he's working on that right now. And we talked a little bit about what's being done in China to go ahead and the importance of China when it comes to Hollywood, the kind of box office they're looking forward to. Because right now, as the pandemic is upon us, to get things back on board, one of the markets that needs to be coming back for Hollywood, most importantly, is China. Because when you look at global versus domestic box office, China contributes so much. Like if I look for the box office for them on a regular basis every year, for 2019, I can go ahead and take a look right now. It reached $9.2 billion in 2019, and that's up 5% from the previous year, 2018. And here's the other thing. Of the total box office in China, 35% of the movies were imported, while 64% were domestic movies. That's big. When you look at that all together, it's, what a chunk it takes up. And when I'm talking about domestic movies, I'm talking about movies that are coming from the U.S. to China. That's what makes up the movies that are over there, 64%. The total number of new movie tickets sold last year was $1.72 billion in China. Average age for movie attendees was 29 years old. Population from 25 to 34 accounted for more than half of all moviegoers in China. This is from stats according to Maoyan Entertainment, which is a platform that provides innovative internet-empowered entertainment services in China. And they put out their 2019 China Film Market Report back in January of this year. And the box office last year declined by 4.8% in North America. According to data from BoxOfficeMojo.com, China further narrowed the gap in box office revenues with North America. So if you're going to have a significant decrease in North America, the fact you're going to have a good 4 months of movies to run in other countries is going to be very important to them. So that's what you got to think about most importantly. Of 551 films released in China, 77.7% were domestic movies, 22% were imported. Just so you know, there's a lot of movies here. So again, 77% of movies came from North America. So they have to have it. Like, that's what's most important. When you're looking at the movies that are out there and what these countries really need, or what China does for the movie industry is very important. But there's a couple different areas we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about first the movies. Then we're going to talk about the movies being, put in a spot. They're being looked with a spotlight by the Attorney General of the United States. Because the government right now and the Trump administration is looking into looking into anybody right now that is doing business with China in regards to the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, because of the coronavirus. Whether you are in agreement or not, again, this is an apolitical show. But what I can tell you is China has been very prominent in terms of influence in music, in movies, and television. And the same thing goes with social media, where we see TikTok and WeChat really dominating the space in social media in certain areas. And there's other Chinese apps that are out there that do the same thing as well, to be honest. But when you look at all of that, you just got to say to yourself, man, there's a lot there to be looked at that shows you how much importance that North America is not the only important market, because China has been allowing movies that are domestic, music, television, and other media that's being done, and a lot of projects are being done back and forth. But how much influence is being done by Chinese companies that are not influenced by the Communist Party in China? That's the question. And so any influence or any kind of direct or indirect relation or correlation to the Chinese Communist Party is what's going on with all this here. So let's focus on it. Now, one of the things I want to say, first of all, is the fact that the movie theaters are looking to go ahead and reopen. Variety.com is reporting that right now. And Forbes also want to read from a couple of these stories that came out and talked about it. So let's talk about that. They're reopening next week. First, I want to take from Forbes. China will be reopening cinemas in low-risk regions from July 20th, according to the China Film Administration. Mid and high-risk regions will temporarily remain closed. But once the low-risk regions become designated as mid or high risk, there will be strictly implemented epidemic prevention and control measures, and cinemas could close again. But again, they're getting the chance. Attendance of each screening will be capped at 30%, and there is a full set of guidelines and safety measures, and overall number of screenings per venue must be reduced to, quote, half their number in a normal period. So each film screening may not exceed 2 hours in length. So we don't know what that means for longer films. Concessions at these cinemas will be banned. So the money that's going to be made is from the movies being looked at. Eating and drinking in the screening rooms are prohibited. Wow, that's crazy. Will people want to go to the movie theaters with that kind of restriction, is the question. I mean, I guess some will. I mean, it's China. I mean, I would imagine some people are just very disciplined. So if they know they can't do it, they're just going to go ahead and follow along. Go along to get along, because they're in a communist country. So they're going to just go along with what there is. So there's more to be said about it. And let's go into what Forbes says, the same thing about it. So the majority of theaters have been closed since January 23rd. And that was just before what was supposed to be $1 billion plus New Year's holiday frame, with a number of local blockbusters set to launch. And in China, a number of studios and exhibition companies were put into serious financial distress. So there you go. For Americans, it's got to sound pretty tough for us to go ahead and watch movies without concessions, without popcorn, without a drink, for that matter. I don't know if you're going to try to sneak in food or try to sneak in a bottle of water or something like that. I don't know. I don't know what you do in those conditions. But again, if this being enforced and regulated, I just don't know. So this Forbes columnist mentions that, well, the first catch makes sense. It's hard to eat popcorn and sip soda if you're wearing a face mask. And after all, the theater chains make the majority of their profits from exceptionally expensive food and drink items. And remember, in the United States, the exhibitions, the movie theaters make up, I think, 55% of the cut of what they get, right? And so they have to go ahead and, they have to make up the money they're going to not make on getting the movies there. They can get movies there, but again, the experience is also to go to get the concessions. Now, and limit on running times. Let's talk about that. So it's arbitrarily and potentially on a movie-by-movie basis, more consequential. So one movie that's going to be coming out is Tenet, the Chris Nolan film with John David Washington in the lead role. The movie runs 149 minutes. 2 hours, 29 minutes. Wow, that's a long movie. So it might not open unless they create a 120-minute version of the movie. I don't know how they're going to do it. But most of your top tentpole movies are more than 2 hours long now these days. Mulan, for example, does run 119 minutes. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, it is 119 minutes. So however it works out, I guess it helps. The original Mulan, I think the animated was more than 2 hours, but without the songs, and you're doing this live action version of Mulan, it will do well. So they'll be able to run it. And if people are willing to go ahead and sacrifice 2 hours of no food and drinks and just have the mask on and watch the movie, I guess you could do it. Now, theaters did try to open back up in China back in March, only to quickly close again due to concerns about further outbreaks. So masks, mandatory, 30% cap on seating, 50% cap on showtimes. First movies will be older. And the 120-minute recap means no reissues for the likes of Inception or Furious 7. There were movies like Little Women, 1917, Jojo Rabbit, and Marriage Story that were approved for China but never made it to theaters. And there were some other movies that were supposed to make it over there, including Bad Boys for Life, Sonic the Hedgehog, and Dolittle. And Dolittle definitely needs to get the help in China to be able to make some money back from the bomb that it was in the United States, in North America in general. Sonic the Hedgehog made $306 million. Could it do something similar to what Detective Pokemon did last year in China, which was $93 million extra? And get $400 million global to make it really successful. Get that worldwide box office number, especially from there. And Dolittle, it needs China to go ahead and make some of its money back. Now, also, if China's delayed blockbusters make a splash comparable to how they might have made it in January, could Bad Boys for Life be the top grossing film of the year? So we don't know. But all that is very important. Now, the other important thing that's going on with the movies is at least they could try to get the movies out in China. Now, we do know that several major markets are not going to be able to have movie theaters open. Specifically, California. Gavin Newsom, the California governor, has shut down, not a full shutdown, but he has made it where he can't have, there will be no movie theaters open for the foreseeable future, probably for the next month or so at the least. So the chance for theaters in California to be open, which for AMC theaters, I believe is 50 theaters of the chain that are located there, will not be available when AMC theaters looks to reopen in 2 weeks. But they will have other markets they can go to, hopefully, to get themselves started. Now, one of the things that really came about, and specifically the pointing out of the studios, was by Attorney General William Barr. So he had some comments when it had regards to China and the Communist Party and the influence it has on a number of American companies. So this is coming from Hollywood Reporter that, quote, Chinese government censors don't need to say a word because Hollywood is doing their work for them, end quote. So Attorney General William Barr had a speech which was aimed at outlining foreign policy toward the country of China, the world's second largest film market. He used entertainment and tech sectors as examples of global kowtowing to the Beijing regime, which now has 70,000 movie screens set up by exhibitors. Quote, Hollywood actors, producers, and directors pride themselves on celebrating freedom and the human spirit. And every year at the Academy Awards, Americans are lectured about how this country falls short of Hollywood's ideals of social justice. He also added, quote, but Hollywood now regularly censors its own movies to appease the Chinese Communist Party, the world's most powerful violator of human rights. This censorship infects not only versions of movies that are released in China, but also many that are shown in American theaters to American audiences. And then he mentioned a couple of examples of the censorship that China causes, where these movie studios are appeasing the Chinese Communist Party by making significant changes for political reasons, no doubt. So Paramount Pictures had an adaptation of the zombie apocalypse novel World War Z, making a change to not have its patient zero be from China. And Marvel Studios changed the Ancient One character, played by Tilda Swinton in Doctor Strange, from Tibetan to Celtic. In April, Republican Senator Ted Cruz introduced a bill called, quote, the Stopping Censorship, Restoring Integrity, Protecting Talkies Act. It will be described as, quote, cutting off Hollywood studios from assistance they receive from the Department of Defense if those studios censor their films for screening in China. So it's also referred to as the Script Act. It was introduced in May and referred to the Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs. So there's a compromise right now in what's and for the movie industry to get themselves, the film industry, to get themselves back up and going, and hopefully having China to be a catalyst that will help them start making revenue back on all these movies that have gotten set up and put together. And all these theaters, these exhibitors themselves, to get movies coming back. So there's a lot of business to be had. And if China can open things back up, that's what all these companies are worrying about. That's what they want to get to. Now, the next part that comes up when it comes to China is TikTok. But we're hearing a lot of stories about that, and let's go ahead and talk about that. Now, I brought up a story in my When I'm Not Podcasting series where I talked about TikTok, and I don't talk too much about social media here on the program, but I think this is very important. There's a lot of talent, a lot of people that are looking to get themselves into show business, a lot of models, a lot of people that want to get into acting or comedy or some kind of entertainment, and they're trying to get themselves noticed from TikTok. I mean, right now, the D'Amelio sisters are an example of that. Charli D'Amelio, now I just saw she's being put in as as a spokesperson or as a spokesmodel for Hollister. I just saw that recently. Her sister now has a music album has a single that's being put out that is now bubbling in the Billboard charts. Sister's name is Dixie. Just to make mention. And besides having new music video, or at least a new song, she also appeared on a YouTube web series called Attaway General. So again, already getting put together and already getting noticed right away. And Charli D'Amelio is probably the most famous person on TikTok right now. She has 71.2 million followers. So actually, Charli and Dixie have landed a Hollister ad campaign as they will be promoting back to school, using a number of people to use for an ad campaign for back to school. I don't know how well it will do, because hopefully we're going to start seeing more kids working their way into getting back to school in the first place. But again, there's a lot of contention about if that's going to happen. But again, that's what Hollister's trying to do. And who knows if these girls might be used for anything else. I mean, they could be used in movies. They could be used in a lot of different projects. They could try to see if they could be hosted. I mean, we've talked about Instagram and other sites have used talent coming from social media to go and come on board. Like, we see names, Lily Singh's one great example that comes from there. You just got to keep in mind of who comes out and who comes viral that will get a chance to get noticed and get a chance to come on board and host programming or be a part of some new TV show. You never know. Or some new campaign. That's what happens. In the case that TikTok could possibly be banned, which is why I talked about this on my When I'm Not Podcasting series, which you can also find through all my different websites. You can also find it at broadcasterspodcast.com. I have a link for it there. You can check that out for yourselves. Well, TikTok could have a rival globally, because Facebook is now preparing to launch its Instagram Reels feature in over 50 markets, including the United States. Now, I talked recently that India was going to be the first one to go ahead and put it out there. Reels would allow Instagram users to create 15-second clips accompanied by music, and the clips can be shared as stories. The new feature will be accessible via a new icon on Instagram. And then there's more news from Facebook, because we'll talk about in a moment, is that Facebook will now have official music videos coming to their platform starting next month. Now, the story about TikTok and the issue with China is this. TikTok continues to face scrutiny from the U.S. government for its ties to Beijing parent company ByteDance. And over the past couple of weeks, the app has been banned by India's government over national security concerns. In the United States, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo suggested that the Trump administration was, quote, certainly looking at doing the same. And as a result of that, Instagram started testing Reels in India after TikTok was made unavailable. Wells Fargo has now banned all of its employees from using TikTok, citing privacy concerns. And then Trump's chief of staff told journalists that action could be taken by the U.S. government, where TikTok could be taken off within weeks, not months. Now, another story that goes along with that is that there might be a compromise that comes across. That happened as I record tonight. The latest thing with TikTok, which again is Chinese influence through film, big influence. And that's got to be understood about this. So Larry Kudlow, who's the chief economic advisor, or senior economic advisor, he told reporters there could be a move by TikTok to leave ByteDance technology company, which would be a better option than a ban on the app. And he said this, quote, "We haven't made final decisions, but I think TikTok is going to pull out of the holding company, which is China run, and operate as an independent American company." And by ByteDance saying that they were evaluating changes to the corporate structure of its business of TikTok and was fully committed to protecting users' privacy and security. And the story, these comments come as TikTok finds itself increasingly in the crosshairs in regards to U.S.-China relations, strained by the coronavirus pandemic and Beijing's move to curb freedoms in Hong Kong. So the Trump administration is studying the national security risks of TikTok and WeChat, with action to address the issue expected in coming weeks. And that the administration was weighing action against Chinese social media services under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, which gives the president broad powers to penalize companies in response to extraordinary threats, citing people familiar with the matter. This is a story from Reuters, by the way. So again, when you have content creation, films that are available to be put into China, a major market, and in return, a major media platform like TikTok, making a lot of people money and bringing a lot of people to the forefront and giving them the chance to be stars overnight. That's big. And it's a major problem that's going on there. So we look at all that, and it's interesting when you look at the whole picture. Next story I want to bring up is the story about Facebook, which we talked about just very briefly. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg has talked about telling investors, he's told investors about the strategy to transform his company into a video-first organization. So now, starting next month, officially licensed music videos are coming to Facebook in the U.S., and Facebook is trying to convince music artists to opt in. According to a new report from TechCrunch, Facebook page owners linked to artists in the United States have been informed by Facebook that if they wish to add music videos to their page, they need to switch a toggle permitting the setting to on ahead of August 1st, This is also news after Bloomberg reported in December that Facebook was in fresh licensing discussions with Universal, Sony, and Warner Music, specifically over the rights to the music videos. Besides switching the toggle, artists aren't required to do very much at all. By enabling the setting, artists give Facebook the green light to add music videos to their page, where they will be visible to fans and followers under a videos tab. So this library of videos, according to TechCrunch, will include the artist's own official videos as well as videos in which once they've opted in, artists can manually remove their videos from this area. And if artists choose not to enable the feature, Facebook will create a separate page on their behalf for their official music. Facebook will control this page, which will be reportedly accessible via Facebook Watch and a new music video destination on the platform. So that's very interesting. They're going to do that. I'm like, all right, let's see what happens here. It'll be interesting if Billboard then eventually will have to start considering Facebook as an additional video streaming source for them to go and start counting towards the charts. I don't know if that'll be something that'll come down yet, but if this is coming into play on August 1st, we'll keep an eye on it. And we'll see how people respond to the actual change. That's an interesting thing that'll come up. A couple of the stories I want to go ahead and cover before I get into my second part of my interview with Rachel Ann Mullins. Let's go into news. Vox Media has laid off 6% of its staff after a sharp revenue drop amid the pandemic. So the earnings report obviously must have come out, and here's what we got. So the brands that are a part of Vox Media include New York Magazine, Vulture, The Verge, and SB Nation, laying off 70 employees. Now, the majority of the employees were already were furloughed in May, when Vox Media was going to furlough 9% of its staffers for a 3-month period. And then Vox Media brought back about 30% of those that were furloughed, who did not take buyouts. In addition, the company will reinstate full salaries as planned with some exceptions. And we'll see how that all happens. And some of the employees have taken pay cuts themselves. So it's very unfortunate for them. Another hit when it comes to media. And, it's surprised how much of a hit it does take after all that's said and done here. But there you have it. Now, there's another story I thought was very interesting when we've talked about all the issues of, diversity, equality, and inclusion. And the issues that Black Lives Matter has really caused, that has been in the forefront of a lot of discussions when it comes to media. We've talked about that on the program in the last month. Well, someone that was an example of a high-profile entertainer, singer, all-around media mogul, if you will. This guy's almost like Ryan Seacrest in the same vein. Nick Cannon, who's relatively young, 39 years old, who has been, a focal point on a lot of different programs. He has hosted some major programs. Most recently, he's been hosting The Masked Singer. He also hosted America's Got Talent. If I'm correct, I think he's still married to Mariah Carey. Like, this guy is, when you talk about somebody that has felt the American dream and has found success above wildest dreams. And also remember, Nick Cannon being best known for also being known as his career grew doing the Wild Out series on MTV. I mean, he's done a lot of stuff. And also, he's had quite a career in radio as well. He actually worked in New York, and now he's working in Los Angeles at the moment. But some comments that he made this week that were anti-Semitic, when everybody's at a very fever pitch right now, and everybody's very sensitive, well, now we're starting to see some things come to light that looks rough. Okay, and that's what's unfortunate here, but here's what happens with everything. Now, the first thing that happened with Nick Cannon was his comments were made, and then the hammer dropped. On the June 30th episode of Cannon's Class, so it took a while for this to start making its rounds, but it got on Twitter, and somebody brought it up. He interviewed Professor Griff, a rapper who was part of the entourage that was Public Enemy before leaving the group after making his own anti-Semitic remarks. On the podcast, Cannon said black people are, quote, the true Hebrews, and talked about an anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, including involving the Rothschild family. Quote, it's never hate speech. You can never be anti-Semitic when we are the Semitic people. When we are the same people who they want to be, that's our birthright. We are the true Hebrews. Well, that said, Viacom CBS chose to end its long-running relationship with Nick Cannon after he made anti-Semitic comments on his podcast. So he had the Wild Out series. He had other programs he was doing with Viacom and CBS, and it caused that here. So now, Viacom CBS said they can condemn bigotry of any kind and categorically denounce all forms of anti-Semitism. They were troubled at the time that he failed to acknowledge or apologize for perpetuating anti-Semitism. Thus, they just chose to terminate the relationship with him. And there you go. And then Nick Cannon went on Twitter and Facebook and says, quote, he has no hate in my heart nor malice intentions. And he holds himself accountable for this moment and takes full responsibility for his actions. So more of what he said on Twitter was the following. Anyone who knows me knows I have no hate in my heart nor malice intentions. I do not condone hate speech nor the spread of hateful rhetoric. We're living in a time when it's more important than ever to promote unity and understanding. Until then, I hold myself accountable for this moment and take full responsibility because my intentions are only to show that as a beautiful human species, we have way more commonalities than differences. So let's embrace those as well together, as each other. I don't have an issue, as a free speech advocate, no issue, even though I disagree with what he said. No issue with him saying it. The one thing I made a comment about was this wise for him to be so open about his thoughts and his opinions? Not because he can't do that. He can't do whatever he wants. But he has a lot of high-profile jobs, a lot of high-profile, gigs that pay very well, and he has a major spotlight, a mainstream spotlight. He's a mainstream figure on television and radio. I mean, he should understand, I'm pretty sure he knows it now, that by saying what he said, he's alienating possibly the management who was giving him that have him under contract, but also the viewers and listeners. So a number of things happened as a result of this. And it rolled down. So again, for someone like Nick Cannon, I think is a talented guy across the board. For what I never thought twice about what he had done. But I thought I thought Nick Cannon has been, quite talented and a success story. Again, 39 years old. I was just imagining Nick Cannon at some point would not feel the need to be any longer on camera. He'd probably move himself further into his own venture. His own business. Who knows? Because the guy could be an entrepreneur and move on to whatever he wants. But he's been able to go ahead and juggle a number of high-profile media jobs. This is a big deal. Talent. He's a talented guy. And for him to go and put himself out there in this moment of real sensitivity, there's a real thin line of what you're able to go and say now these days, regardless. And I think he just felt a bit empowered that he wasn't going to feel any ramifications for what he would say. But now he knows he was going to get it. He might have felt a little bit overconfident. Who knows what his thought process was? I don't want to think that, but it was just really interesting about what he wanted to do. So he is going to get to retain his hosting duties of The Masked Singer on Fox. So Fox said in a statement that they were aware of Nick Cannon's interview and immediately began a dialogue with Nick. He is clear and remorseful that his words were wrong and lacked both understanding and context and inadvertently promoted hate. This is important for us to observe. Nick has sincerely apologized and quickly taken steps to educate himself and make amends. So we'll move forward with Nick and help him advance this important conversation broadly. So that's good. And by the way, the Wild and Out show, even though after he hosted it, he still owns the series. It's a series he created himself and is part of that. So he does get to go ahead and keep something of here, but again, he loses some spots. And another major portion of what he's been doing of his time, in media is his radio show, which just launched last month, replacing Big Boy's Neighborhood at radio station KPWR in Los Angeles, Power 106, a major station, which also was affiliated. He was just starting to pick up affiliates as well. So, as I record tonight, he's also announced he's taking indefinite leave from his radio shows. He says, I decided to take some time away, quote, from my radio show so I can commit myself to deeper, more thorough reflection and education. I will use this time to establish an action plan towards real, impactful change and advocacy aimed at bringing people together. And the network that runs his show will offer an alternate host to take over the meantime. Skyview Networks is his syndicator. They were syndicating the program at Power 106, KPWR Los Angeles, and also a deal for distribution to Rhythmic CHRs in January, as well as a weekend countdown show. So affiliates you had also was a station in Portland and Louisville that were running it. Portland was running the show and afternoon drive, or kind of afternoon drive into the nighttime, and the Louisville station, WGZB, was running in the mornings. And so we go. So he has kept some of his work, and he's just taking time off and getting away to kind of really just kind of cool down tensions, and that he comes back refocused. It's unfortunate to hear what happened. But again, I mean, this is where you also have to be careful now. More importantly, where I've said this before, in the career that you take, wherever you decide to go in the media career that you are, if you're a content creator, you have to realize that everything you might say, depending on how big a profile you have, whether it's social media, in front of the mic, behind the camera, whatever it might be, that there will be a good chance of, scrutiny. Because something can happen. You could say something, do something, and you might not think it's improper. You might not think it would be hurtful, but you have to be careful of making sure you don't do things that will force you to apologize or to compromise what you have as part of a contract you're signed under, or what you might be doing. Because obviously, we're seeing a lot of different ways, especially in radio, where people are very quickly able to go ahead and be let go. Racist comments from a station in Rochester, and that station had to go ahead and fire the people that were there that made the comments. Rightfully so. A lot of this goes on, and people just need to understand, you have to be afraid. You have to be, you could be, really depending, you have to play the game of, if you want to be outspoken about whatever you feel, whatever you think, that you have to also keep in mind that there is a good chance that you might alienate or isolate whoever is your employer. You do not want to have to apologize for something that you did. So, it's unfortunate. But again, if you are at the behest of other people and you're playing to a bigger audience, then that's where your politics and some of your opinions don't get put out there. There's ways to get it out there, but again, you should be unapologetic as to what you do. Honestly, I think about it back in 2007 when I saw Twitter and Facebook coming to light, and really seeing a lot of people get up and close and personal when it comes to seeing that social media was going to be the next big thing, overnight sensation. Doesn't matter who you are. Whatever you put online, it's going to be out there and documented. So whatever you say will be in the public eye and can always be scrutinized at any time. Obviously, we have a cancel culture that plays on. It doesn't matter who you are and where you come from. Unless you have an absolute immunity that's almost diplomatic because of how big you are, you can't fail. That might be a different story. Or you have real protection of who is there that's looking out for you. So that's a lot to be taken into account. You just have to watch out for yourself. And that's what I would say. Most of the people just, again, you can stretch the boundaries as much as you want, but you got to be able to do it with the power that you have, with the ability that you can. But you also want to remain unapologetic. And if that means you have to hold back something that you might say for fear of alienating somebody else. If you want to become somebody bigger, the better route is to be unapologetic. If that means you have to kind of hold back on what you want to say, what you really think, you have to in life, and sometimes, it's just how it works. Unless your opinion has a very wide world view. But again, for me, I don't want to put my politics out there. Not publicly, no. And I also don't want to I also wouldn't want to just have to say something that I would have to come back and apologize for. Like, I don't have a problem retracting something or correcting the record of something I say. But to have to apologize for something that I did, I don't like apologizing in the first place. I don't think any of you would like to do the same thing. So if we can avoid that, that'd be better off. Just saying. One more story before I get to the interview with Rachel Mullins. Let me go ahead and bring this up. Edison Research and Trenton Digital put out an Infinite Dial report about new music seekers. And so the story begins, and it continues. 68% of respondents utilize YouTube for music discovery, 47% from family and friends, and 46% from AM and FM radio. Among the 12 to 34-year-olds, YouTube rises to 72%, Spotify 51%, friends and family 49%. 35 to 54 aged respondents, YouTube leads with 64%, AM FM is 53%, Facebook 45%. So radio usage surges with 55 plus. 70% of respondents say AM FM is where they find out about new music, 53% from friends and family, 57% from YouTube. Interesting story there. New music seekers are willing to pay for music services. 49% of new music seekers have listened to Spotify in the last month. And of those, 45% have a paid subscription. More than one third of new music seekers say they have a subscription to SiriusXM, nearly double the percentage of the general population 12 plus. Many of these new music subscribers are maintaining paid subscriptions to both SiriusXM and a streaming music platform. Tells you a lot. Radio, music radio, in decline. Will they take this into account and do something more? That's the question. We don't know. But I hope my radio people are listening to this and saying, listen, we have to do something more. You have to find some new ways to go ahead and get it out there. Just saying. Okay, time for me to go move along to part 2 of my interview with American model, actress, and producer Rachel Ann Mullins. Again, she started her career at the age of 12, producing viral campaigns for mega brands in addition to short films and web series. Produced and directed a feature-length documentary called YouSlut. And she hosts the podcast No Filter Friday via Public House Media. So check that out for yourselves. If you're looking for the podcast itself, you can go to publichousemedia.org to find the show. And also, if you look under Apple Podcasts, you'll find it as No Filter Friday. She has a very interesting show. The show is actually described as Hollywood is rife with scandal after scandal. What is held common knowledge around Tinseltown shocks the public. When the story breaks, the mainstream media only publishes what they think is digestible. Here we explore what's really going on from the inside out. No Filter Friday. Look for it where you find your podcasts. And again, publichousemedia.org is where you find the show. Check it out for yourselves. Here's part 2 of my interview with Rachel Ann Mullins here on the Broadcasters Podcast. I want to talk about, from the street.com, Rebecca Rose Woodland. She's a litigator and legal analyst. She did a recent interview when it comes to sex crimes in Hollywood. She says this, quote, "What happens then is, which happens often with lawsuits, is that there is a deterrent effect. I'm hoping that it not only puts the bad guys behind bars, but it deters people. It changes conduct. It makes people aware that this sort of conduct won't be tolerated anywhere across America and across the world because what this man did was victimize women. The jury found out to be the case. But there are many other victims of other sexual crimes, women, men, it doesn't matter who. We want to discourage that from happening across the world and moving to a place of more peaceful society where people respect each other." How do you view that statement?
Absolutely. And I think that was for the home, for the super close to home and the domestic side of it. Yeah. Harvey Weinstein had every resource at his disposal to squash this, just like he's been squashing it for years. But the man spent $600,000 for former Israeli Mossad and other like private detective agencies to build these like giant dossiers on like the Rose McGowans of the world. Like, it's very, very hard to be somebody who went to interview to go be his nanny, and then he attacked them to go up against even a quarter of that. Like, going to court is really hard. It's not as hard as people think. And if somebody wrongs you, then it's an actionable offense. You should take action. But it is hard. It will drag you through the dredges of your life. And then to go do that against someone who has every available resource and can drag this out until the end of time is extremely daunting. So on the flip side of that, like what she's talking about is like, yeah, hopefully somebody who has that much juice or not even any of it is like, yeah, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. Because, Mr. Harvey's in isolation right now, but if he was in general population, he'd be getting that ass tore up Medea style. So if that's what you want in your future, like, you can make the same choices as old Harvey, or you can just...
I think about the fact this, Rachel, I mean, I really think about, because first of all, there's just so many different people that come into Hollywood that are, even the same thing when you see people going from, from some small town America to New York City, and just the vulnerability. Because here's the thing, you're looking at you, okay, young, probably quite beautiful, precocious, could be a little bit naive. Who knows at 12 years old how you came and what kind of a life you've lived prior to go ahead and getting yourself in front of a camera and dealing with all the people of the world, all these different, management and, photographers and directors and whoever people that are handling your career, and to put the trust on them. And there could just be these bad actors across the board. I'm honestly happy to see that you've made it through after all this time, that you didn't get caught up into something like that. Or I don't know.
I'm really shocked that I didn't, but I'm also from Detroit. So
okay.
I think that, the Lord works in mysterious ways.
Yes.
And I think that probably had a lot to do with it. And again, I don't understand power structure. So if somebody was to be like, oh, hey, let's do this, I'd be like, I gotta go, and just not give it a second thought.
Right.
But yeah, a lot of that is just God's protection and being from Detroit originally. So
exactly.
I've already seen worse. Take your Tinseltown crap somewhere else.
Wow.
But yeah, it is shocking to me, and people assume that about me. They think because I shouldn't say that I work in space because I don't think it's funny with my podcast, but because I'm so heavily involved in that space, they're like, oh, you must have been whatever, and I'm like, no, actually not.
Yeah,
I wasn't, but an advocate nonetheless.
Amazing. I want to ask also about this, because that's also the other thing that most contracts have, because everybody's under contracts, and that's why certain things can get away, like they get away with, right? Bloomberg Law, they had a story titled "Workplace Morals Clauses Take Hold Beyond Showbiz in the Me Too Era." Now, here's what they said. Morality clauses, quote, which allow companies to terminate contracts based on behavior that could damage corporate reputation, largely appear in contracts for Hollywood actors and endorsement deals with stars or athletes. But their use is expanded into C-suites as employers on Wall Street, taking it to the other level, and beyond seek to avoid backlash from executive misconduct that can hit their bottom lines. So what do you think about this growing trend that Hollywood was responsible for the morals clause to be much more prominent across every other business sector?
I mean, I think that's a great idea, and I think Hollywood should also do it too, because as an actor, or most of the time as a front facing, even above the line people do have these morals clauses in their contracts, but for whatever reason that doesn't extend to network executives or studio executives. Like, there's been several networks, i.e. children's networks like Disney and Nickelodeon, that have these morals clauses, in their performer contracts for children or for the adults on those networks. And they're strict. You can't do this, you can't do that, blah, 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 blah. but they regularly hire pedophiles behind the scenes, known child molesters. So,
and I've heard some names about that.
How are you going to tell Hannah Montana she needs to adhere to a morals clause when you're over here hiring and rehiring pedophiles? Like,
I'm not to put the blame on anybody because it's innocent until proven guilty. But if I hear another thing about Dan Schneider at Nickelodeon again, my God, I'm afraid of some of the things I hear, that rumors and innuendo that come out there, and I only can wonder, who else is out there that's causing some things like this that is being kept so tightly tightly lipped that nobody's talking about. And obviously the moralities clause is very important. I just think, again, listen to the victims. I mean, if, regardless, kind of listen to people and take people for the chance and just, investigate things as they come across and find out what's going on, because it's scary to see all this is going on.
I mean, everything merits due diligence. Everything. Like, there's nothing, I'm not really a huge, I know that's an unpopular opinion to the friend that I have, but I'm not like a big, like, cheerleader for like, believe all women or believe all whatever. Like, right. I don't actually think that's a good policy. Like, I do believe in due process, and I think it's really, really important.
Yes.
For everybody involved. And that's not just here where it's constitutionally enshrined, but like across the world, and even aliens. Let's extend due process.
Right.
But I think that's important, and I think to harken back to the whole like culture shift and like self-policing and things like that, of like, okay, every time somebody says something, we have to unpack this bag fully and get everything out and see what the deal is. Like, nothing's automatic, as it shouldn't be. Like, nothing should be automatic. We have to, put the effort into the due process and the due diligence and investigating what happened and going from there. No, like, knee-jerk moves have never served anybody. So let's not say that we did.
Exactly. But I'll tell you, there's a lot of things where you're seeing it even just like on social media. You're seeing just that everyday people are kind of getting themselves caught up in the cancel culture and just a real moral, puritanistic kind of feel if anybody has any kind of opinion or thought process that doesn't go with the status quo. It's just like, and the thing is that there's got to be an openness, an opportunity for people to go ahead and say a free speech, damn it. Where is that? Be able to go ahead and say, if something's happening, people should go and, be able to speak up. Not only speak, but speak up.
It went the same place, mature adults went. Like, there's just not, it just doesn't seem to be around anymore. And for whatever reason, the fanatical has such a loud voice that, and I feel like this is my own life. Like, I can see the writing on the wall. I know what's up. When things don't add up, they just don't add up. And like, it's plain to see that. And I'm not really trying to argue with anybody about it. And we have, really put a premium on this whole, like, debate about it. It's like,
yes.
Debating and arguing.
Debate and discourse. We should have much more of that. Please. I would love that. I like to have that. I don't like this being shut down. And there's certain things I can't say or can't do. It's just not fair. Now, I want to move along a little more into this and delve into the fact of how this same story about morals clauses. This was the interesting part. So a business law professor at University of Miami, Patricia Abril, she said this also, because even though these morality clauses can be overreaching in an era where ubiquitous internet activity and political sensitivity has put everybody's off-duty speech, conduct, and reputation under the microscope. So when they're not behind the camera, even what you say that's not even like, on the record, off the record, you are being watched. You are being, monitored. Now, here's the thing that she says here. While they can suppress misconduct, the agreements can serve as a powerful tool for companies to insulate themselves from biased claims, terminate contracts if there's public backlash. She says this, quote, morals clauses can become more problematic when there is a great differential of power between the parties. It's not hard to imagine a situation in today's world of social media where some kind of behavior can embarrass the company. People today are more likely to judge that person, and that can lead to reputational spillover on the company. People come to quick judgments. Absolutely correct. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. But I do, and again, I think that's a maturity thing too. Like, I think when somebody, when Ariana Grande licks a donut at the Cronut place on 3rd Street and says some dumb stuff, like, okay, whatever.
Or whatever she did with the donuts thing. I forgot what it was that she did with the donuts thing.
She licked a donut behind a thing and then said, "Oh, Americans are like just stuff. It's just something Ari-esque, right?" And should she have done it? No, but like, did she do that while at a press junket for Nickelodeon for Sam and Cat? Or no, she didn't.
Right.
That was on Ariana's own time. And there's that argument. It was like, oh, well, they're a public figure, and like, oh, it's like, well, no, they still have their own time. They're not working in a professional capacity right now, and that's just something that I think we've seen a lot play out with like Meghan and Harry lately. Is that every little thing is scrutinized, and it's like, well, when she's walking the dog down the street in Canada, like. She's not shaking a dignitary's hand like her dog's taking a shit. Like this is not news, kids. It's not. Like
I still can't believe Rachel from Suits is royalty. I still never will get over that, and she got married to the prince. Like I still can't believe that. But,
believe it. I think she got a way better deal than she did, honestly.
Oh, probably.
In my opinion.
Oh, God.
I remember seeing her at Gifting Suites back in the day.
Say again?
So I remember seeing her at Gifting Suites back in the day.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, this was a million years ago, but yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, that whole crew of chicks from like the Deal or No Deal days, like Joanna Krupa, Rachel Sterling.
But you know what? Okay, this is the point I got to make this before I miss this. Okay. There is a line where you can go ahead, if there's stuff that you're doing outside and you're just like living your life, absolutely, but then there's also times where celebrities can take it upon themselves. They can go on the social media, use that platform, don't realize what they're saying, and like, oh shit, Vanessa Hudgens, what the fuck did you just say? What are you doing?
Well,
you're trying to ruin your career. I don't like you. Don't do that.
Luckily for Vanessa Hudgens, she doesn't really work anymore, so I guess she doesn't have to worry about these things. But she's a lovely girl.
I thought she was great. And by the way, I saw her in Bad Boys for Life. I thought she was great, and I was like, come on.
She did a job. That's fantastic. Most of the time, the last time I see her for the last few years is at the Mel's on Sunset.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, I think you have to think about like your likability and stuff like that, and like, who really cares about other people's opinions? Like, hashtag nobody. Like, that's just not, unless you're directly involved in some way, I don't see how it's relevant. Like, oh, my opinion on this, except I've never experienced it. I've never been by it. And like, I'm just telling you what I think. Like, please hush your mouth and let the adults talk. Like, I think there's something to be said for that. But there's also like this, for whatever strange reason, like the public outcry, like this person should speak on this. It's like, why? For what?
Exactly. I'll tell you, there's one guy that I think about from radio that I always, I used to listen to a lot, but not as much because even when we went to podcasting, it's not the same when he doesn't have a phone call. People can call in regularly and all. He always talked about Tom Likas, who was in LA based, right?
I knew you were going to say that. I could feel you about to say Tom Likas. Yes.
He always talks about, do not see anything you have to apologize for, because you do not need to apologize. You're just weakening your stance. That's the most important thing I live. And I've taken that to heart, is that I'm going to make sure if I go on any program or I say anything at all, it's going to be something I will not have to apologize for. I might have to clarify, but not apologize.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like a deal, like you need to be able to walk away from the deal in 10 seconds. And you also need to be able to stand by what you said. So think about it before you say it.
Yes.
And be like, no, I feel that way. I said what I said. There's God for me leaves. Like,
exactly.
You said what you said. But at the same time, though, there's like this public hunger to be apologized to, which is a really strange dynamic. But a lot of people made a lot of money for it. Like Farrah Abraham comes to mind. Her and I used to share a couple.
It's like an orgasm or something. It's really ridiculous. I can't stand it.
It is really strange. Like, Farrah will go out and do something, just being Farrah. And then people be like, oh my God, Farrah, you're such an evil cunt. And then she's like, okay. And then she's like, okay, great. And then she'll do a bunch of press because people were, calling her names. And then after she's done doing that press, she'll do apology press. Like, she's a machine. But she knows what she's doing. She knows exactly what she's doing.
Apology press. I haven't heard that one before. Oh my God. That's just horrible. Well, let me ask you, I got to ask about this then. So let me get to the documentary because I haven't had a chance to, we got a plug for you. So the YouSlut documentary, great name. It talked about sexuality shaming and gender-based violence around the world. At the time when you were promoting this, 2016. At the time you promoted this, you said, quote, "I'm doing my best as a first-time director to seek out all different kinds of women, sharing the commonality of shame and give them a louder voice than those trying to silence them." So several years removed, talk to me about the mark you've made with that and how your podcast continues to deliver that message.
Oh my gosh, I have really had no idea when I was getting into when I was doing that, because I feel like looking back on it, it's like now it's like more relevant than even it was then, which is crazy. But I started in Hollywood, started with Amber Rose's Slut Walk in downtown LA, and that was like a really interesting experience. And this dude, Brother Dean, showed up, if that's what he calls himself. I don't know his real name. But he's like one of these guys that runs around with a bullhorn and like signs like, if you wear yoga pants, like you deserve to be raped, or you're asking to be raped, whatever. Like, he's got a new slogan every day. Like, you can just Google him. Yeah. But he's over here with his bullhorn, doing his thing, and these girls are just of all flavors and varieties, and guys too.
Yeah.
Just there to experience the experience and contribute to it or whatever. So that was really interesting. I interviewed people there, and I did interviews. I talked to VH1 and MTV and like a lot of the press outlets that were there. And then I interviewed other ladies around Hollywood, like Tiffany Haddish.
I couldn't believe, what a coup. Wow. I mean, she was just, now look where she's gone, how far she's come since in 4 years, I'll tell you.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. Tiffany's been my friend forever. And like, she used to come to my house for Thanksgiving when I would cook.
Oh, she's great. I think she's awesome.
I love her so much. And Tess Broussard and a couple girls in like the porn industry, and like I just got on the horn and like called the cavalry, like, everybody come through, we got things to talk about. And we did, and it was amazing. And just talked about like those different levels of shame from different things. Like Tiffany talked about this guy that she met when she was a teenager who was a nurse somewhere. And I guess he was like 24 or 25. And you have to listen to Tiffany tell the story, because that's what
I got to hear the trailer so far, and I started going off about it. I'm like, I could listen to her just talk about this for a while, because she's like so uninhibited, so uncensored, blatant, blunt. I love it. She's talented, very talented, very funny. Love her. And I got to tell you, when it comes to, the fact that you also talk to porn stars, you talk to those in the adult industry, I got to delve into that as well. I got to go and take a microphone around, working a couple different events. I worked at Internext in Las Vegas. I got to do forget what the other one's called. It was I can't think of it now. Exotica, that's the other one, with 3 X's on it. So I got to talk to, Tara Patrick and Ron Jeremy and Jesse Jane and all those types. And I'll tell you, honestly, I thought the industry, first of all, I loved it. I thought the people were great, because
a lot of them are good to each other. There was one girl that talked about how there was like horror shaming like within in the industry, which I thought was a really interesting dynamic.
Yeah.
There was one girl who cosplays, and she also does porn, and she was talking about how, and this kind of tipped me into like this whole cosplay rabbit hole that I fell down, which was really fun. But how like she got more shame for doing cosplay than she did for doing porn. She's like, "What is this? Like, what? Like, I'm wearing a Tinkerbell outfit. Like, seriously? Like, what? How is this a problem for you?" So that was kind of like, the third wave Western version of it, and then took it to Jamaica, and that was kind of an experience, because 40% of Jamaicans, like, their first sexual experience is either coerced or just straight up rape, and that's like a whole culture in the Caribbean that they won't really talk about, but that's apparently, I'm not the person to like bring that story to life, but I'm sure some people. And then I went to Europe and covered Sweden, which is the rape capital of the Western world. It's only second to Lesotho in South Africa, and then the sex attacks in Cologne on New Year's Eve. Which Nobody knew about that at the time.
Oh, they don't. No, there's nothing to talk about. Another thing too is that also hear about the migration issue, the migrating of all these different people from different.
Well, that's why nobody was willing to talk about it, and it was so funny too because like from a filmmaking standpoint, as soon as I put out that first teaser, I had so many people calling me like trying to get on the train because they thought I was going to give them a job or they wanted to get involved or whatever. And they're like, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go, check out this Germany thing and go run through some of these refugee camps and see what's up. And they're like, oh my God, like you can't be so blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yes, I can. I don't need your money. Goodbye. Like,
exactly.
There was, I'm not going to say that I like lost friends from it, but I lost a lot of respect for some people that called me during that time. They're like, oh, well, you can't say that. I'm like, you go watch me. Like, like you can't tell me that Angela Merkel blowing open their borders to 1.4 million people from God knows where, and then having the largest coordinated sexual assault in recorded history, and then suppress the story in not only the European media, but the global media. And then when it finally started leaking around Europe, 5 other countries raised their hands and said Me Too, before it was a Me Too thing. They had the same situation happen. And then on top of it, they a memo was leaked from Angela Merkel to the mayor of Cologne. The mayor of Cologne, who was a woman and the victim of a knife attack herself, saying that you need to tell your chief of police to go back and expunge the word rape from any of these police reports. There was over 600 police reports that night for theft, sexual assault, rape, like you name it, the whole gamut, right? They only arrested 3 people, and it was because they had stolen cell phones and for no other reason. But it's like, these things are related. They're related. And Sweden had a similar situation. Sweden has been, Scandinavia always touts themselves as like, we don't even have prisons here because there is no crime. It's like, no, there's crime. You just don't do anything about it. Like, there's a difference. And that was another, every single person that I met on this entire tour of the world, this lap of the world that I did, had been dogged out by the media so severely, it was just disgusting. I interviewed a girl in Sweden who was on this like an interfjordal like graduation cruise. She's gay, and the most guy in her life, and a guy took her in a cabin and raped her, and also gave her herpes simplex 1 that she will have to live with for the rest of her life. And the ship security did throw him in the brig, but as soon as they got back to the dock, the police came and he was like, oh, she wanted me to. And they took the handcuffs off of him and they sent him on his merry way. He wasn't arrested. He wasn't booked. They didn't fingerprint him. He never had to go before a judge, nothing. And the Swedish media would not print in her story that she was gay because it's not a Swedish thing to say.
I still think about, and I remember so vividly, when Don Lemon had on CNN Ami Horowitz, who talked about Stockholm Syndrome, his documentary about Sweden and the issues of rape and sexual crimes up there. Same thing. I'm just thinking, but again, it was just going to get shot down. I'm like, and I just remember they were fighting about the rape cases, about how many were being reported, but it's like, no, that's not the proper agency that you're getting it from. This is the actual source you're getting it from. It's so underreported. Nobody wants to talk about it. It's like, sweep it under the rug. It's ridiculous. You just made me think about that. I was like, oh, God damn it, man. And it's
a hard thing. Like, sexual crimes from a perpetrator standpoint is like one of the perfect crimes to commit because your victim doesn't want to tell anyone and they don't want to report you.
Rachel, I love you. I'm so grateful that you are so fucking brave that you were taking this on. Because honestly, you got to take some courage here to do that, especially when because there's risk involved. I mean, the thing is, you definitely putting yourself out there, and it's like, who else is going to do it? Somebody's got to be that fighter. And I'm glad you're fighting for those that are not, voice of the voiceless. That's wonderful. And I'm really grateful that you put this documentary together. You're going together with No Filler Fridays and making that possible. They're going to do that. But I got to ask you about, what brought you to the dance here, brought you to the documentary, brought you to your podcast, your work in Hollywood. So I got to ask the one industry question. And I ask everybody from Hollywood ever get on the show now. Backstage recently wrote, quote, from Broadway to movie theaters to labor unions, industry leaders are bracing for entertainers and audiences to get sick, and for an industry that relies on social gatherings to undergo long-term financial effects, end quote. So what can you tell me about how the pandemic has affected you, those you know from show business? Also, you have to, add on top of it the labor agreements, which are all being negotiated by, you had WG and ATA going back to last April. Then you got the AMPTP. and you got then SAG-AFTRA, which you have your card, correct?
Yes.
So talk to me about the effect it's had on you and those you know.
Okay, so currently, like, everything's shut down, which really, really, really blows, because me and my business partner, I work with Jason Abelos a lot, and we have a production company called Schoolhouse Pictures. And we work together a lot. Not every day, not on everything, but most things. Because I have a very hard time rocking without him, and he has a very hard time rocking without me. We're just this combination of bougie and ratchet that just makes things happen. But him and I sat in September and did our entire plan for the year. Like, if you asked me in September, October, November, December of last year, I would tell you exactly everything I was doing from January 1 to December 31st of 2020. Completely booked. And guess what? I'm no longer booked for the next foreseeable future. Yes, it sucks. Like, I was supposed to be in Jamaica this month shooting music videos for my friends, but they decided to stay in Russia because they did. So that sucks. And then there's obviously nothing going in town. And then I heard from Kevin. Here's the exclusive. Here's a No Filter Friday tease line. Heard from Kevin Feige yesterday, who runs Marvel, that they're not even considering reopening production until August.
Wow.
No, Marvel producers.
I heard a lot of productions till July, but I didn't realize August. Man.
Yeah, they're not even.
And there's a lot of releases that are going to get pushed back. And I saw Black Widow finally got pushed back to August, I think it is. And I'm just, you have to. There's no choice. There's a whole year's shot.
Real short award show season. A lot of movies are just going to get dumped in streaming, which, could revamp the streaming industry for all I know. We'll see.
But I can't stand that. Hey, Rachel, I love going to the theaters. I like my popcorn. I got a Regal Cinema subscription, and I don't give a damn about the movie. Like, honestly, I knew the theaters were going to get shut down. So I say, I don't care how good the movies are or not. I want to go see Bloodshot. I want to go see The Hunt. I saw them on that last weekend, 2 weekends ago. I'm glad I did, but it's unfortunate. And I don't feel like watching on Netflix, and it's just not the same like they're going to the cinema.
It's really not. Especially for the sound perspective. Like, even if you have a theater in your home, it's still not the same. 5-1 is meant to be heard in a movie theater with the, behind the screen, and then like your sound on the sides and rear and all that stuff.
Agreed. I miss my RPX, man. I miss the IMAX.
5-1 sound is so expensive to do, and it cannot be heard in any other environment hardly. I think what the hardest part about this year is, outside of just like the personal implications of like we're not supposed to shoot anything, I don't care. I'm going to continue to shoot music videos. Shit.
Right.
But I spent all of February hopping around Asia. I did 8 flights through 5 airports, and then I came home and worked until the 20th with clients. And if I was going to catch this raggedy bitch, I would have caught it.
Right. Well, I still think that. Again, media is definitely overblown this whole thing. I am not saying I am not taking this very seriously. I've sat here in my house for 10 days. I am taking this shit seriously, but the media is not helping. I even got to tell my family, I'm telling my parents, stop watching the goddamn TV news. Stop watching it. It's so cancerous. You're going to get.
I mean, I say that in a regular situation. Like, don't watch this garbage. That's when it's good times. Let alone now. Right. No, turn it off, because they have, the panic brings profit. And as you'll notice, the government and the mainstream media, they're not taking any kind of days off, except they're telling you that you can't go to work. So we'll see what happens when April 1st rolls around and these checks aren't here and bills aren't actually canceled. We'll see how far how this hysteria pans out.
Amen, sister. I am lockstep with you. Podcaster at Arms. Again, we're going to promote. Again, it's through Public House Media. No Filter Friday. Look for it where all major podcasts are available. I know you're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. You're on all the major ones. And give me the website for Public House Media so they can find the show.
I believe it's just publichousemedia.org. We're very easy to find. Yeah, if you Google me, if you Google Public House Media, if you Google No Filter Friday, it will all come up because, well past the 100 episode mark, and people tend to have opinions on my podcast, especially if I talk about Woody Allen.
Oh no, but I love that you're so lax about it. Like, well, first of all, for podcasting, I don't know what your favorites are, but I mean, for me, Joe Rogan is like the standard bearer. Like, that guy's just like, He makes it so fucking simple. It pisses me off, but I love it at the same time. I really do. Twitter is Rachel Mullins.
Yes. I like to keep things confusing. So Twitter is at Rachel A. Mullins, and then Instagram and Facebook is at Rachel Ann.
And it's Mullins, in case anybody thinks it could be, because I've seen it spelled the other way as well. And also Rachel, and not the extra A. That's also getting confusing too.
The basic bitch way. Don't throw in an extra A. Just that's it.
Rachel, I've loved this interview. You are a doll. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you for joining me, and I wish all the best. And please stay safe and be well.
Absolutely. Send me the things, and we'll flex on the gram together.
Totally. And we're clear. Thank you so much. You were so awesome.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed this. And I'll tell you another thing I didn't mention on the show, but that's it for the Broadcasters Podcast tonight. Thank you for listening in, finding the show, whether you listen to it through YouTube or catch it on the download for the podcast, wherever you find it. Please rate and review. Share this podcast with others. Let people know about the show, what you want to hear about on the next episode or future episodes of the Broadcasters Podcast. I would love to hear from you. And if you have somebody that you think, or if you think you might be a great guest for the program, please email me, kingofpodcasts@yahoo.com. Till next week, remember, content is king, and the control of your content is in your hands.
Thank you for listening to the Broadcasters Podcast, presented by broadcasterspodcast.com and kingofpodcasts.com. The Broadcasters Podcast is brought to you by kingofpodcasts.com/Amazon. If Amazon is good enough for the King of Podcasts, it most certainly is good for you. kingofpodcasts.com/Amazon. And don't forget to check out the King of Podcasts wrestling program. The Wrestling is Real podcast, exclusively at kingofpodcasts.com.